Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. It is a busy news day. We're going to get started this morning with major new developments in the federal investigations into former President Donald Trump.
Special counsel Jack Smith is leading both of these inquiries. Yesterday, lawyers from his office investigating alleged interference with the 2020 election met with Trump's lawyers. Trump has denied any wrongdoing, but Smith is believed to be preparing charges against him in that case. So far, that grand jury has not handed up an indictment. Now, in the Mar-a-Lago investigation, Smith announced a superseding indictment against Trump, which means Trump faces additional charges in that case. That includes 1 count of willful retention of defense information and 2 counts of obstruction. That brings the total number of charges in that case to 40. Prosecutors are accusing Trump of ordering his employees to delete security video at his Florida home. One of those workers is also being charged. Maintenance supervisor Carlos de Oliveira is now accused of helping Trump hide the documents. The former president has already pleaded not guilty to the initial indictments against him and has denied any wrongdoing in these new charges.
We did absolutely nothing wrong. This is just another hoax. It's called, I would say, election interference more than anything else. It's a disgrace that they can do it. Next question. But everything was fine. We did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it.
We've got a team standing by to cover all aspects of this story, from reaction on Capitol Hill to the campaign trail. We're going to start with NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. And so, Ken, the focus had very much been on Trump's other investigation into the 2020 election interference and the allegations there. But now we have this updated indictment on the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Walk us through what prosecutors are accusing Trump of in these new charges.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Look, this is a deeply significant new development in this Mar-a-Lago case because it adds a new dimension to both the retention of classified documents portion and, even more importantly, the obstruction of justice portion. So what it alleges is a new conspiracy between Donald Trump and his 2 employees to delete surveillance footage, which is incredibly significant and something I think every American can understand. And it also says that that document relating to potential military options for Iran that former President Trump discussed on tape that we've all heard, where he was sharing it with some people working on a book, that the government actually has that document, that it was turned over in the first batch in January of 2022 when Donald Trump turned over a set of classified documents. It's a top secret document. So they've added that count to the indictment. But more importantly, they've added a new chapter. And as you said, a 3rd employee, Carlos de Oliveira, the property manager at Mar-a-Lago. And what this indictment now says is that de Oliveira told another employee that Donald Trump wanted surveillance footage deleted at Mar-a-Lago a few days after a grand jury subpoena came into Trump's lawyers demanding that footage, and that Walt Nauta, the other co-defendant in this case, went down to Florida to try to make that happen. So really, really important new charges.
So, I mean, Ken, we've got a new defendant. Maintenance worker Carlos de Oliveira has been named in the case. What does the indictment say about his alleged role, and do we know how he's responding yet?
His lawyer has declined to comment. He's expected in court in Florida on Monday to answer for these charges. Look, he's the property manager at Mar-a-Lago. And what this indictment says is that a few days after Donald Trump got a subpoena for surveillance footage, which would have showed employees moving boxes of classified documents, his valet and butler and now co-defendant, Walt Nauta, went down to Florida and had a conversation with Mr. de Oliveira, as recounted by other employees, to make it clear that Donald Trump wanted surveillance video footage deleted. Now, there's no allegation that the footage actually was deleted, and they don't have a direct witness who spoke to Mr. Trump, because de Oliveira spoke to Mr. Trump, Nauta spoke to Mr. Trump. Both of those men are co-defendants. Obviously, the government would like to flip either of these gentlemen to have them testify against Donald Trump, but that has not happened yet, Joe.
And Ken, switching to the other investigation we've been keeping an eye on into accusations that Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election. What do we know about that meeting between Trump's legal team and the special counsel's office?
Well, sources familiar with that meeting tell NBC News that it was a standard, typical last appeal by defense attorneys, knowing that their client is about to be indicted, making their case. Nobody thought it changed any minds. And we expect now an indictment in this January 6th related election suppression case any day now, given that Mr. Trump has received a target letter saying that he was liable for charges in that case. And so we don't believe that the grand jury is expected to meet today, Friday, but generally that grand jury meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we'll be looking for next week for action in that case.
All right, Ken Delaney, and keeping an eye on all of it for us. Ken, thank you.
Now let's bring in NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard for more on how the former president is responding. Hey, Vaughn, good morning. So we heard a little bit from Trump just a few minutes ago, but what else did he have to say, and what are we hearing from his legal team?
Right. The difficult part here for Donald Trump is the fact that his legal defense counsel is trying to come up with their best way forward, knowing that a trial is slated to begin as of right now in May of next year. It is likely to be pushed back because of the superseding indictment. But Donald Trump's explanations of the documents that he retained at his Mar-a-Lago property, they have been constantly changing and evolving explanations and defenses. I want to let you hear his latest last night with Fox. Take a listen.
Everything was fine. We did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it.
You're not concerned then with your own voice on those recordings?
My voice was fine. What did I say wrong on those recordings? I didn't even see the recording. All I know is I did nothing wrong. We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the paper, and nobody said I did anything wrong.
And the part about this is particularly there is around the Iran-related document that Donald Trump had been recorded discussing. And this was a audio recording that was taking part as part of a book interview that he was doing related to his chief of staff. And in that audio recording, you can hear papers being rustled around. Donald Trump had suggested that they were newspaper clippings here at one point. But now what this new superseding indictment lays out that, in fact, it was a sensitive document. And the sensitive document was acquired by the Department of Justice as part of their efforts to get these documents here from Mar-a-Lago. And for Donald Trump, this is undercuts the very defense that he had publicly made, that it was nothing more than articles in newspapers. But in fact, it was, in this particular situation, a sensitive document related to Iran, and that he actually had held it up and showed other individuals who did not have the classification abilities to be able to access such documents.
Ron, let's talk about what's ahead. As you mentioned, there is this set date of May 20th right now. First, I'm wondering, just walk us through why that is likely to be pushed back. But also what's interesting here, of course, is this is not just a former president that we're talking about. It is another presidential candidate. So talk about how this will impact the campaign and what we might see happen with that date as we move forward.
Right, Savannah, we literally had the conversation just a couple of days ago, you and I, about May, that was going to be after the Republican primary. We were likely going to know if he was going to be the Republican nominee for president in 2024 or not. But now this calls into question whether this trial related to the classified documents will happen before the general election of 2024, and that Donald Trump may be a defendant all the way through next year's presidential election, because the amount of new evidence that the Department of Justice is required to turn over to the legal defense. And as part of this process ahead of a criminal proceeding, it is the obligation of the Department of Justice to provide all of the material that they have in their possession in which they intend to take to that trial and give it to Donald Trump's legal defense so that they can look and better understand what they're defending their client on. And because of these new not only charges, but also the evidence that is expected to come forward as a result, we should expect the judge to move this case back beyond May of 2024, potentially after the 2024 election next November even.
And Vaughn, while this is all unfolding, Trump is not at all letting up on his campaign schedule. He has an event in Iowa alongside rival Ron DeSantis and other GOP candidates. We've also seen these fundraising emails come out as we've been discussing this. We've heard him talk about this in stump speeches. Quickly, we can expect more of that in the weeks and months ahead, right?
Right. Donald Trump has used his legal perils to his financial benefit. I think it's important to understand. We have watched, every day, the Trump campaign send out multiple emails suggesting that they are trying to lock him up for life. The Department of Justice is trying to lock him up for life. And in the first 6 months of 2023, they were able to effectively raise $53 million. And it's important to note that in those emails that they send out to supporters, 90% of that money, it goes to his 2024 presidential campaign. But 10% of those funds, they actually go to what is called the Save America PAC. That PAC has actually been paying legal bills for not only Donald Trump, but also other allies of his in the past over the last year and a half. So that is where these fundraising is not only important for the campaign, but also for his own legal efforts here ahead.
Vaughn Hilliard, as always, thank you very much.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos is here now to help us dig into these charges a little more. Danny, good morning. Let's stick with the Mar-a-Lago documents case. These new charges, what do they tell us about the investigation and the evidence prosecutors have collected?
One of the first things I do when I get a superseding indictment, because it's difficult to compare them and find out what is new. And that's what everybody was sort of struggling with in the hours after the indictment came out yesterday, is figuring out what is different and what is new. And one of the most obvious things is that there's a new defendant. The other thing that federal indictments do that make it very helpful is they list all the statutory charges on the first page. And the one new charge that jumped out at me, and now that everybody knows about, is one that relates to destroying, mutilating, whatever records that may be used in an investigation. And that's exactly what's alleged here, is that in the indictment you see that allegedly the defendants were working to pressure even other employees at the Trump organization or at Mar-a-Lago to destroy video that would probably, at least according to the indictment, be incriminating to them. So this is the only real question I still have is why now? Why was this not brought in the original indictment? Why did they only just now develop this information? But it's not uncommon for federal investigators to develop this on a rolling basis and obtain superseding indictments as they get more information about new defendants or new charges.
Let's switch gears to this other investigation, interference in the 2020 election. Yesterday, we saw this meeting with Trump's legal team and special counsel Jack Smith's team. What did you make of that meeting? What does that mean might happen? And do we know when we could see something?
It doesn't mean much. The government's always interested to sit down and meet with the defense. They'd be much more interested to sit down and meet with Trump, but Trump's defense team and no sane defense attorney would ever let their client go in and sit down and talk to the government when the client is a target. That is a huge no-no. Of course, the government would always welcome that and tell them, oh, yeah, tell us your story. We may reconsider. They're not going to reconsider. He's a target. People stay a target. Targets eventually get indicted in almost every circumstance. So that meeting may have been another last-ditch effort by the defense to say, listen, here's our bullet points why our client should not be charged. It's a bad idea. Here's some extra information. The government will willingly take all that, use it if they can, and then probably charge him anyway. So probably the needle was not moved by the defense yesterday as much as they mightily tried.
All right, Danny Ceballos, appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you so much.
Yes, great to see you, Danny. Well, from Capitol Hill to the campaign trail, lawmakers were quick to react to this news about all this. Let's bring in NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin with more. Hey, Julie, good morning. So first, just how are lawmakers on Capitol Hill reacting to this news?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, it won't be a surprise to you or our viewers to note that very few lawmakers wanted to talk about this because, of course, we chase them for reaction after every single indictment and every single development in the former president's case. And the very few we heard from, there's a theme emerging, and I want you to pay attention to what it is. We heard first from some lawmakers who took to Twitter, right, because the Senate and the House were almost out of town when these charges came to light. Marsha Blackburn, for example, writing on Twitter, quote, the DOJ's decision to pursue additional charges against President Trump is further evidence of the politicization of our nation's top prosecutorial agency. Then we heard from Roger Wicker, a Republican from Mississippi, who said, as I have said repeatedly, justice should not be political or selective, and the powers of the government should not be weaponized by one party against the other. So this all comes, of course, as Republicans in the House are focusing on Hunter Biden and other investigations, trying to connect and prove that they believe that the government under President Biden is weaponized against conservatives. But Speaker Pelosi, the former speaker, actually spoke yesterday and had this to say. Watch.
But the very idea that we're talking about such things, very idea that his supporters think he is above the law. We just can't, as again, we don't agonize and organize because we want to unify.
Now, before these new charges came to light, I was talking to Republicans earlier in the day about the other case, the January 6th election interference case, and they were all saying just that. They were coming to the former president's defense. In fact, Senator Lummis told me every single time this happens, he just goes up in the polls.
What about on the campaign trail, Julie? Any of the other Republican candidates talking about the latest indictment, taking swipes here?
Yeah, why don't you take a listen to the very few we heard from Senator Tim Scott, who's also running for president. Watch what he had to say.
At the end of the day, what we all should be very concerned about is the weaponization of the Department of Justice. We should be very careful on how we use immense power against political opponents.
So this talk of weaponization of justice, you'll hear that all these folks are not necessarily defending the former president's conduct. They're just saying that the government, in their eyes, is weaponized against conservatives and that they're trying to just prove a political point here.
All right, Julie Sirkin, thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting this morning.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.